here remembering Tony Dow, the Beaver's big brother. He was Wally Cleaver in Leave It to Beaver.
Wally, why are you putting that goop on your hair?
It's not goop. It's Groomwell.
Leave It to Beaver ran for 6 years without a single major mistake. The writers checked every detail. The actors knew their lines perfectly, and even the smallest prop was carefully chosen. But in one famous scene, something went terribly wrong. For 4 minutes and 17 seconds, America's favorite know-it-all made a blunder so obvious, fans still debate. Look closely at this scene, and you'll discover how one visible mistake changed television forever. Leave It to Beaver started on TV on October 4, 1957, and became a big part of American culture. It was about a boy named Theodore Beaver Cleaver, his older brother Wally, and their parents, Ward and June. They lived in a small, made-up town called Mayfield. The show ran for 6 years, ending on June 20, 1963, with a total of 234 episodes. Every episode showed Beaver getting into some kind of trouble. Sometimes his friends caused it, and other times it was because he was curious and made mistakes. These problems could be small, like not doing his homework, or strange, like getting stuck in a giant soup bowl on a billboard. In the end, his dad, Ward, would have a talk with him, and Beaver would learn an important lesson. What made the show different was how it focused on kids' points of view, not the parents. Most family shows back then were about what the adults thought and felt. This made Leave It to Beaver special and helped people connect with it. The Cleaver family felt real, even though they showed an ideal version of family life. The show became a symbol of the perfect American family. A dad who worked hard, a mom who stayed home and took care of the house, and 2 good kids. It influenced the way people thought about family for years. Over time, phrases like "Gee, Wally," and "Ward, I'm worried about the Beaver" became very popular. Bloopers, or mistakes on set, feel surprising for such a perfect-looking show. Everything seemed polished, like nothing ever went wrong. But like any TV show, there were moments when lines were forgotten or things didn't go as planned. What's interesting is how rare these mistakes are. Back in the 1950s and 1960s, TV shows were filmed on expensive 35mm film. Retakes cost a lot of money, so they tried to get everything right the first time. Small mistakes often stayed in the episodes because fixing them wasn't worth the cost. One small error turned June's kitchen calendar into something like a time machine. In the 1963 episode called The Poor Loser, something odd happened that sharp-eyed fans noticed years later. The episode aired on April 25, 1963. It starts with June standing in the kitchen, writing on her wall calendar. Everything looks normal at first, but if you look closely, the dates on the calendar are from 1961, not 1963. For example, May 1st, 1963, was a Wednesday, but on June's calendar, it's a Monday, exactly how it was in 1961. Somehow, the Cleaver family's calendar had jumped 2 years into the past. How did this happen? One explanation is that the show's prop department reused an old calendar without realizing the mistake. The show had been running since 1957, so it's possible they had old props lying around and didn't think anyone would notice. Another idea is that it might have been an inside joke by the creators, but that seems unlikely since the show was always so careful about details. Most likely, it was just a simple mistake. Back in the 1960s, most people probably didn't even see the error. TVs back then didn't have the clear picture we have today, so small details like this weren't easy to spot. It wasn't until much later, when fans could watch the show on DVDs or online, that people noticed the time-traveling calendar. Interestingly, this wasn't the only time-related oddity in Leave It to Beaver. Throughout the series, there were moments when the ages of the main characters, Wally and Beaver, didn't quite make sense. They seemed to age inconsistently, creating a floating timeline where time didn't always match reality. Then, in an episode called Summer in Alaska, Eddie Haskell makes a mistake that has kept fans talking for decades. Eddie, known for acting like he knows everything, talks about his upcoming summer job on an Alaskan fishing boat. To impress his friends, he mentions a famous book 2 years before the mast, but he says the author is Charles Dana. This is wrong. The real author is Richard Henry Dana Jr. Eddie even connects the book to Dana Point in California, which is correctly named after the author. But he keeps using the wrong first name, which makes the mistake even more noticeable. This moment happens exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds into the episode. Eddie, in his usual smug style, says, I wonder if you're familiar with 2 years before the mast. It's by Charles Dana. The book, published in 1840, is about Richard Henry Dana Jr.'s life as a sailor in the 1830s. It was a popular and important book at the time. Eddie, who usually tries to look smooth and smart, seems completely out of character here because he gets such a basic fact wrong. Fans were surprised because Eddie's whole personality is about being clever and informed. This mistake has led to lots of debates among fans of the show. Some think the writers did it on purpose to show that Eddie likes to bluff his way through conversations. Others believe it might have been an error in the script that no one noticed during filming. The fact that Eddie correctly talks about Dana Point, a real place mentioned in the book, adds another twist. It makes it clear he knows something about the book, but still gets the author's name wrong. What makes this mistake even stranger is that it's not the first time 2 years before the mast is mentioned in the show. In an earlier episode from Season 4 called Beaver's Book, 1961, the book is part of a school assignment, and there are no mistakes in how it's referenced. This earlier accuracy makes Eddie's later blunders seem even more puzzling. Fans and TV experts still argue about whether the mistake was intentional. Some say it fits Eddie's character to confidently say wrong things, pretending to be smarter than he is. But others think it's unlikely the writers, Joe Connolly and Bob Mosher, would make such a basic error because they were usually very careful about details. No matter how it happened, this little mistake has become one of the most talked about moments in Leave It to Beaver. In the episode The Silent Treatment from Leave It to Beaver, aired on March 14, 1963, there's a funny and clever moment that shows just how creative TV effects were back then. Beaver, played by Jerry Mathers, is painting a door outside when a buzzing bee suddenly appears. But the bee isn't real. It's actually a small prop, likely made of foam or balsa wood and painted to look like a bee. It's attached to a thin nylon fishing line that lets the crew control its movements. You can even see the line on screen, which might seem like a mistake. But instead of editing it out, the visible line stayed, adding a playful, almost whimsical touch to the scene. To make the bee fly, someone just off-camera moved the fishing line to mimic the jerky flight of a real bee. It was a simple trick, but very inventive for the time. Back in the 1960s, television didn't have the fancy effects we see today, and viewers didn't expect everything to look perfect. The charm and humor of the scene were more important than absolute realism. People watching back then found joy in these clever little details. What's fascinating about this moment is that it shows how creative early TV crews had to be. They didn't have digital tools, so they used practical effects, things they could physically make and move. This bee on a string effect is a great example of the hands-on craftsmanship that defined early television. Special effects in the 1950s and 1960s often relied on miniatures, painted backgrounds and clever camera tricks. Shows and movies during that time made the most of limited resources to create entertaining illusions. For instance, in 2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968, space scenes were created using miniature models and precise camera work. The original Star Trek series, 1966 to 1969, also used practical effects, like model spaceships and hand-built props, to show a futuristic world. A big leap in technology came with the development of blue screen techniques in the 1950s. Disney's Mary Poppins, 1964, used this to combine live actors with painted backgrounds, like the famous scene where the family flies over London. Today, special effects are mostly digital, using CGI to create realistic characters, environments, and even entire worlds. Movies like Avatar, 2009, and the Marvel films rely heavily on computers to make things look seamless and lifelike. Modern tools let filmmakers do things that were impossible back in the 1960s. Still, some directors, like Christopher Nolan, love practical effects and use them in combination with CGI. For example, in Inception, 2010, Nolan used real sets and stunts to create mind-bending visuals. This mix of old and new techniques often feels more real to the audience. In the 1950s, television was very strict about what could be shown, especially anything related to bathrooms. It was considered improper to show a toilet on screen, so most shows pretended they didn't exist. But Leave It to Beaver changed that with its episode Captain Jack, which aired on October 11, 1957. This episode was originally supposed to be the series premiere, but it caused so much controversy that it was delayed and aired as the second episode instead. In the episode, Wally and Beaver Cleaver try to hide a baby alligator in their toilet tank. This simple and funny idea caused huge problems because it was the first time a toilet appeared on American television, even though only the upper tank was shown. For 4 minutes, the scene showed the boys dealing with the alligator and the toilet tank. That short moment led to months of arguments between the show's creators and CBS network censors. The network didn't want the toilet shown at all, but the show's producer, Joe Connolly, fought hard to keep the scene. He explained that it was important for the story. Eventually, they made a deal. The toilet tank could stay, but not the bowl, and it couldn't be directly referred to. This compromise pushed the episode out of its original slot, and another episode had to air first. But the toilet wasn't the only issue. The episode also showed Wally and Beaver giving the alligator brandy to make it eat, which raised concerns about underage drinking. These two things together made Captain Jack a real challenge for the show's creators, who had to work carefully to get it approved. Getting this scene on air wasn't easy. The CBS Standards and Practices Department, which enforced censorship rules, originally rejected the episode. That put the whole series at risk because Captain Jack was supposed to introduce the Cleaver family to viewers. Show creators Bob Mosher and Joe Connolly had to convince CBS that showing the toilet tank wasn't shocking or inappropriate. They explained that hiding an alligator needed a water source, and a toilet tank made sense. They also argued that pretending toilets didn't exist was silly because everyone had one at home. The breakthrough came when CBS executive Hunt Stromberg Jr. supported the show. After long debates, the network finally agreed to the compromise. The toilet tank could be shown, but only from specific angles, and no one could talk about it directly. The creators had to use clever camera work and dialogue to follow these rules. This 4-minute scene made history and influenced television for years. It opened the door for other shows to depict real life more honestly. It wasn't until 1971 that another big toilet moment happened on TV, when All in the Family aired the sound of a toilet flushing. By starting this shift, Leave It to Beaver changed what people thought was acceptable on screen. In the episode The Party Spoiler, which aired on December 27, 1962, Beaver felt left out because his older brother Wally was having a party, and he wasn't invited. Instead of sitting around upset, Beaver came up with a sneaky plan to ruin the party's music. He made a little device called an interrupter and plugged it into the record player. The interrupter would randomly stop and start the music, throwing everyone off and messing up the dancing. When the prank started, the music kept cutting out, leaving Wally's friends totally confused. They didn't know what was happening, and the whole party turned chaotic. It was funny to watch the characters react as everything fell apart. Beaver's prank seemed pretty clever, but here's where the story gets a little unrealistic. Back then, record players didn't work the way they do now. They couldn't just start and stop instantly. Models like the Garrard RC88 or BSRUA14 needed a few seconds to warm up when turned on. If this had happened in real life, the music wouldn't have started back normally. Instead, it would have sounded slow and weird, like the record was winding up before playing at the right speed. That would have made the prank even funnier, but the show ignored this for the sake of keeping the timing sharp and simple. This kind of creative shortcut wasn't uncommon in shows from that time. They often bent the rules of how things worked to make the story flow better. In this case, it made Beaver's prank easier to understand and funnier for the audience, even if it wasn't technically accurate. Despite the little technical flaw, fans loved this episode. The prank stood out as one of Beaver's best schemes. Over the years, it's been referenced and even parodied in pop culture. In 2018, a fan survey ranked The Party Spoiler as the 7th most popular episode of Leave It to Beaver. Most fans agreed the record player prank was the highlight of the episode, with 68% naming it their favorite moment. Barbara Billingsley played the perfect TV mom, June Cleaver, in Leave It to Beaver. The show aired from 1957 to 1963 and became a big part of television history. But there's a funny and surprising story behind her role. As the show went on, her on-screen sons, Tony Dow and Jerry Mathers, started growing taller, fast. Tony, who played Wally, went from being 5 feet 2 inches at 12 years old to 5 feet 8 inches by the 3rd season. Jerry, playing Beaver, also grew, starting at 4 feet 3 inches and reaching 5 feet 4 inches by the end of the show. Barbara, who was 5 feet 5 inches, started to look shorter next to them. And this didn't fit the picture of a traditional family where the mom should appear taller than her kids. To fix this, Barbara started wearing high heels on set. At first, the heels were small, but as her sons grew, so did the heels. By the last season, she was wearing 3-inch heels, making her look 5 feet 8 inches. It wasn't just about style. This was to keep the family looking the way the show wanted. A strong, put-together mom leading the family. The heels became a part of her character, just like her pearl necklace. But wearing those heels every day wasn't easy. The Cleaver home set had super clean, shiny floors, and Barbara had to be extra careful walking around. In one funny moment, while filming an episode, her heel got stuck on a loose floorboard. She almost fell into a table full of props, but luckily, the crew caught her just in time. Everyone laughed about it, but it showed how tricky it was to keep up appearances. Even after the show ended, Barbara didn't stop wearing heels. In a 1997 interview, she joked that she felt strange without them. "Those heels became a part of me," she said. "I felt like I was shrinking without them." The town of Mayfield in Leave It to Beaver has always been a mystery that keeps fans guessing. The show never clearly stated where Mayfield was located, and this decision has led to endless theories and debates among viewers since the series first aired in 1957. Fans love trying to piece together clues, but the show also included many contradictions, making it impossible to pin down Mayfield's exact location. One popular theory is that Mayfield is in Ohio, near Cleveland. This idea became popular because of references in several episodes. In Season 3's Wally's Test, November 14, 1959, Ward Cleaver is called the pride of Shaker Heights High School, a real suburb of Cleveland. Another clue comes from the episode Beaver's Fortune, December 5, 1959, where Beaver and Larry Mondello walk through Mayfield's business district. Fans notice that the scene, although meant to be Mayfield, was actually filmed in Skokie, Illinois, specifically on Lincoln Avenue near Oakton Street. The background shows landmarks like St. Peter's Church and the First National Bank of Skokie. But this Ohio theory doesn't fit with other details in the show. In Summer in Alaska, Season 4, June 18, 1961, Eddie Haskell gets a job on a fishing boat in Alaska, which hints that Mayfield might be near the Pacific Ocean. In another episode, The Poor Loser, Season 6, February 7, 1963, Ward mentions that they live only 20 miles from the ocean. Obviously, this doesn't work for a location in Ohio. These ocean references support another theory, that Mayfield is in California, near where the show was actually filmed. Episodes often mention beach activities, surfing, and warm weather, which fits a California setting. In Wally Buys a Car, January 10, 1963, Wally and Ward drive down 3rd Street in Santa Monica, and the El Miro Theater and Clock Tower building can clearly be seen in the background. The confusion doesn't stop there. The show also mentioned locations that suggest the Midwest, like Wisconsin and Illinois. In one episode, Crystal Falls is brought up, which is a real town in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. There are also frequent references to living near water, which could mean the Great Lakes or the ocean, depending on how viewers interpret it. To complicate things further, the 1997 Leave It to Beaver movie added its own twist. In the film, a check prop showed the Cleaver family's address as 211 Pine Street, Mayfield, Ohio. This seems to confirm the Ohio theory, but since it wasn't part of the original series, many fans don't consider it official. One thing that made Leave It to Beaver unique was how it handled humor. Unlike most sitcoms back then, it didn't use a laugh track. Instead, it focused on a natural and subtle comedic style. This approach was rare, and later became one of the reasons why the show was so special in television history. The creators, Joe Connolly and Bob Mosher, had a clear idea of what they wanted. They believed the humor should come naturally from the characters and their situations, not from obvious jokes or slapstick moments. They even had a surprising rule. If a line got too much laughter during filming, it was removed. Tony Dow, who played Wally Cleaver, shared this in an interview. He said, "If any line got too much of a laugh, they'd take it out. They didn't want a big laugh. They wanted chuckles." This meant the team carefully reviewed each scene to keep the humor light and realistic. They wanted the Cleaver family to feel warm and relatable, not like characters in a typical joke-heavy sitcom. This decision wasn't easy. At the time, laugh tracks were common in sitcoms to help audiences know when to laugh. Without them, Leave It to Beaver risked people not understanding its humor. But the creators stuck to their vision. They wanted the show to reflect real family life, even if it was idealized. They also took extra steps to keep things authentic. For example, they told the parents of the child actors not to let them watch the show. This was to make sure the young stars didn't become self-conscious or start acting differently because of fame, which was a common problem for child actors. Even though Leave It to Beaver didn't rank in Nielsen's top 30 during its original run, it became a classic over time. Its gentle humor and realistic family dynamics won over generations of fans. Many writers and producers later admired its natural style, which was ahead of its time. Modern sitcoms often follow this same approach, skipping laugh tracks and focusing on humor that comes from the characters and their stories. Tony Dow summed it up perfectly. He said, "There are no big laughs in the show. The comedy comes out of the situations based on the characters. It's not joke-oriented." This subtle, situational humor was something many later shows adopted, proving how forward-thinking Leave It to Beaver was. On June 20th, 1963, the final episode of Leave It to Beaver, titled Family Scrapbook, aired. This marked the end of a 6-season journey with 234 episodes. It was a groundbreaking moment in TV history because it was the first time a primetime American sitcom ended with a planned finale. Before this, most shows simply stopped without giving the characters or the story a proper ending. The main reason for the show ending was Jerry Mathers, who played Beaver. At 15 years old, he was about to start high school and wanted to live a normal teenage life. He wanted to go to school, play sports, and enjoy activities that his filming schedule never allowed. The show's creators, Joe Connolly and Bob Mosher, along with the network, respected his wishes. They also felt the story had reached a natural ending. Wally, played by Tony Dow, was graduating high school and getting ready for college. Without Beaver or a big change in the family story, the show wouldn't feel the same. What made this decision even more interesting was that Leave It to Beaver was still popular. It had a loyal audience, even though it never made it into the Nielsen Top 30. Ending a show that was still doing well showed how much they cared about their star and staying true to the story, rather than just continuing for money. The final episode, Family Scrapbook, gave the show a warm and nostalgic send-off. In it, June Cleaver found an old family scrapbook, and the family looked back on their past. This gave viewers a chance to revisit the best moments of the series. It even revealed the long-awaited story behind Beaver's nickname, something fans had wondered about for years. Ending the show this way changed how TV shows were made. It showed that giving characters a proper goodbye mattered. Many shows since then have planned their finales to create satisfying endings for their stories. This idea, which started with Leave It to Beaver, became a standard in television. After the show ended, it became even more popular in reruns. Its timeless themes and wholesome family stories continued to connect with new generations. This enduring love for the show led to a reunion movie, Still the Beaver, in 1983, and a sequel series, the new Leave It to Beaver, which aired from 1984 to 1989. By ending the show thoughtfully, respecting Jerry Mathers' wishes, and letting the story come to a natural close, Leave It to Beaver left a lasting legacy. It remains a beloved classic, not just for its family stories, but for how it changed the way TV shows think about their endings.